This is going to be a nice short video on how to use completing the square to prove the quadratic formula. Now, the quadratic formula is probably the easiest way to solve quadratic equations, but this method is how we actually get to that formula in the first place. So if you watch the previous video, you'll know the 6 steps that we've got to follow in order to complete the square to solve a quadratic equation. And the first step that we dealt with was always to go and check out this first term where we've got the x squared and make sure that its coefficient was 1. But you see in this case the coefficient is a. So we're going to have to change that straight away. And the way that we do that is by dividing every term by whatever the coefficient is. So in this case, dividing every term by a. The result of that gives us this weird looking equation where we've got x squared plus b over ax plus c over a equals 0. Then we can move over to step 2. Step 2 was always to move the constant term, which in this case is the c over a, onto the right-hand side of the equation. So let's do that, and we're going to end up with x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a on the right-hand side. Then we go on to step number 3, which tells us to take this b over a, or the coefficient in front of x, divide it by 2 and square it. So if we take that b over a and we divide it by 2, we're going to get b over 2a. And if we square it, we're going to end up with b squared over 4a squared. And if you have seen the quadratic formula before, you're already starting to see the resemblances because of this b squared over 4a squared. The next step then, step number 4, is to take this value that we just worked out and to add it on to the left-hand side and to the right-hand side. Because what we do to one side, we got to do to the other. That'll leave us with x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared. And that's all going to be equal to negative c over a plus the b squared over the 4a squared, like so. Step number 5 was to factorize the left-hand side, which is basically saying go and factorize this whole piece over there. But that looks like a mission to factorize. So the shortcut, or the trick to doing it, is simply to write out your bracket as a perfect square, write your x in, and then take whatever was inside this bracket here from step number 3, and go and write that in your bracket over here. So it would be x plus b over 2a, like so. And then we're just going to need to neaten up the right-hand side over there. And you can see that the right-hand side there is got an LCD of 4a squared. So to get that same denominator in this term here, we're going to need to multiply the top by 4a and the denominator there by 4a as well. And so we end up with minus 4ac plus b squared all over the common denominator of 4a squared. Once you've done that, we know that the next step was to simply go and solve for the x over there. So get that x on its own. And the way we worked that out was by square rooting both sides of the equation, not forgetting the plus or minus that needs to go in front when we square root both sides because of difference of two squares. So once we've done that, the The square there and the square root are going to cancel each other out. So we're going to be having x plus b over 2a is equal to plus or minus. Nothing's going to happen to this numerator here because we can't take a square root with anything that's got that plus in the middle there because there's more than one term. And if you want to rearrange it to look a little bit neater, we can rearrange it as b squared minus 4ac. Again, you're seeing the quadratic formula taking shape here. All over the square root of 4a squared, which is just going to be 2a. And look at that. Same denominator there and same denominator there. So when we simplify and we take that b over, we're going to get x is equal to minus b over 2a plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. But because we've got the same denominator there and there, we can write it as one fraction with minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4 over ac, all divided by 2a. And this over here is our quadratic formula. And we can use that to solve any quadratic equation by simply substituting in the coefficients a, b, and c into the formula here to get our answer.